You're useless, Layla. Absolutely useless, Ronan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. I fought back the tears stinging my eyes, refusing to show weakness in front of his family. 7 months pregnant, I had felt a wave of dizziness wash over me and needed to sit down. Instead of concern, my husband's reaction was filled with disdain. Look at her, can't even stand up straight carrying my child. Ronan's parents, Mason and Layla, remained stone-faced, offering no defense. The rest of the family averted their eyes, an uncomfortable silence filling the room. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner, bringing the extended family together before the baby's arrival. But like most family gatherings, it became another exhibition of Ronan's cruelty towards me. Your grandchild, I corrected him sharply. Or did you forget I'm carrying your daughter? Ronan rolled his eyes. If it was a son, it might actually be worth something. Gasps rippled through the room, but Ronan seemed unfazed by his callous remark. I felt a sharp kick from my unborn daughter, as if she could sense her father's indifference. Mustering all my strength, I rose to my feet, steadying myself against the table. How dare you diminish the value of your own child before she's even born? Ronan barked out a laugh. Value? You've contributed nothing of value, Layla. I'm the one who built this family, this company. What have you done besides be a dead weight? His words cut deep, dredging up years of belittling comments and demeaning behavior I had endured. But this time felt different. A line had been crossed. As I looked around at his family's impassive faces, I realized they didn't see me as one of their own, just a vessel for Ronan's heir, at least until he decided I had outlived my use. That's when I caught Sienna's eye from across the room. My sister-in-law offered a subtle nod of solidarity, the hint of a defiant smirk playing across her lips. In that moment, I knew she recognized Ronan's manipulation for what it was, toxic and abusive. You're right, Ronan, I said steadily. I haven't contributed anything of value. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. Not to you, at least. His brow furrowed in confusion as I turned my focus to the rest of the family. But this child, this daughter you've already dismissed, she is valuable. She's my future, a future free from any of you. The room fell into an uneasy hush as I mustered every ounce of conviction. I'm done being treated as worthless. My daughter and I deserve better. With that, I strode out of the room, the dull roar of Ronan's objections fading behind me. A weight had lifted, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my own destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, but no longer would I accept being diminished and devalued. After years of allowing Ronan's toxic presence to define me, I was finally ready to redefine myself and show my daughter what it truly means to be a woman of strength. No more complacency or fear, only determination to rise above. In the days following that fateful dinner, I found myself questioning everything about my marriage to Ronan. His callous disregard for our unborn daughter laid bare the true depths of his cruelty and lack of empathy. This man, who was supposed to be my partner for life, had reduced me to little more than an object, a disposable vessel for producing his heir. But I was done being disposed of. That night, after leaving his vitriolic family behind, I had marched straight to the home office and began digging into our finances. What I uncovered shook me to my core. Evidence of Ronan's rampant financial mismanagement and deceit that spanned years. Hidden offshore accounts, falsified business records, illegal money trails, all carefully obscured. You lying snake, I muttered, poring over the damning documents. Just then I heard the telltale click of his study door opening. Well, look who's still awake burning the midnight oil. Ronan sauntered in, arf thinly veiled derision lacing his words. I figured you'd be too busy wallowing after your little tantrum the other night. My hands trembled with rage, clutching the financial records like a shield. You're one to talk about tantrums. Your own toddler outbursts have funded this. I shoved the documents towards him. Care to explain all this, dear husband? Ronan's eyes widened as he flipped through the incriminating pages. For a split second, panic flashed across his face before his expression contorted into one of snide amusement. Finally did some digging, did you? He chuckled darkly. I'll give you this much. You're not as big of an idiot as I thought. Don't play dumb with me, I spat. I know about the money laundering, the shady business deals, all of it. You've been lying to me from the start. Ronan simply shrugged, unperturbed. So, Those were necessary evils to get to where I am now. All you had to do was play the role of the devoted little wife. But you always did have trouble following directions. His brazen admission, devoid of any morsel of guilt or shame, was like a viper's strike to my heart. How could I have been so blind, so utterly naive to the depths of Ronan's moral depravity? You selfish, heartless bastard, I seethed, fists clenched. Did you ever love me at all? Or was I always just a means to an end in your grand game of lies and deceit? A cruel smirk played across his thin lips. Now you're catching on, but you're giving yourself too much credit, pet. You were a convenient accessory, a pretty ornament to adorn my winning success story. Nothing more. White-hot anger flooded my veins as the weight of his treachery washed over me in waves. This man didn't deserve an ounce of my loyalty or affection. Not after everything he'd done, all the ways he'd betrayed and belittled me. And in that moment, I made a vow to myself and to my unborn daughter. I would bring this whole rotten edifice crashing down around him. Ronan wanted to see me as worthless, as nothing more than a means to an end. Fine, I would show him just how ruinous being underestimated could be. Rising to my feet, I met his cold stare with white-hot defiance blazing in my eyes. You're going to regret the day you ever crossed me, Ronan. I waved the documents with contempt. All of this is going to be your undoing. No more hiding, no more lies. I'm going to make sure everyone sees you for the soulless snake that you truly are. Ronan let out a contemptuous bark of laughter, seemingly unfazed by my declaration of war. But I could see the slightest flicker of uncertainty in those beady eyes of his. Good, the first embers of fear had been stoked. My path was now clear. It was time to rally my forces, gather my allies, and enact the grand unraveling of Ronan Jacobs' carefully cultivated lies. The reversal of his ill-gotten fortunes was going to be deliciously karmic, and I would be the orchestrator of his downfall, just as he had been the architect of my dehumanization. The great game of revenge was only just beginning. In the aftermath of my explosive confrontation with Ronan, I found myself at a crossroads. His web of deceit surrounding the family business was so intricately spun, taking him down would require more than just my resolve. I needed an inside source, an ally with intimate knowledge to counteract his uncle's shadowy machinations. That's when Sienna entered the picture. My sister-in-law had been sidelined by Ronan and the family elders for years, deemed too headstrong and independent for their antiquated tastes. But her marginalization shielded her from their corruption, allowing her to see the rot festering at the core with striking clarity. I reached out to her a few days after discovering Ronan's illicit financial records, suggesting we meet for lunch to catch up. Sienna, ever perceptive, seemed to sense the weight behind my request. "So what's really going on, Layla?" she asked once we were seated at a quiet cafe, her eyes narrowed with cautious curiosity. "This can't just be a social call after what went down at your dad's place." Exhaling slowly, I pulled out the now dog-eared folder and slid it across the table towards her. "See for yourself. Ronan's lies run much deeper than any of us realized." Sienna's brow furrowed as she flipped through the damning pages, her expression oscillating between disbelief and anger. When she finally looked up at me, her green eyes were blazing with righteous fury. "That arrogant, chauvinistic prick," she hissed, slamming the folder shut. "I knew he was a bastard, but this is a new low, even for him." A rueful smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt vindicating to have someone finally see Ronan's treachery for what it was. "You and me both. That's why I need your help taking him down." Sienna cocked an eyebrow quizzically. "My help? Why come to me?" "Because you're one of the few people with a frontline view into the family's dealings," I said frankly. "With your insight into their illegal activities, we'd have a better chance of exposing Ronan's lies and watching the whole corrupt edifice crumble." For a long moment, Sienna studied me appraisingly before letting out a bitter chuckle. "Gotta hand it to you. You've got a set of steel ovaries going up against Ronan like this." Her gaze turned flinty, burning with years of repressed resentment towards my husband and his family. "I'm in. It's high time that misogynistic prick got taken down a few pegs." Relief washed over me, knowing I had a co-conspirator, and a fiercely capable one at that. With Sienna's insider knowledge combined with my evidence, we would be an undeniable force to be reckoned with. "So what's the plan?" she asked, leaning in conspiratorially. How do you want to dismantle this cancer infecting our family? A feral grin spread across my face as I laid out my initial strategy. Lawsuits, information leaks to the press, back-channel communications to law enforcement, nothing was off the table. Like Jenga pieces, we would systematically extract the foundational blocks underlying Ronan's empire until the entire decrepit tower came crashing down around him. Sienna listened intently, offering insights and recommendations along the way. Our partnership was quickly solidifying into a potent alliance, two wronged women joining forces to enact poetic justice. You know there's no turning back after this, right? Sienna cautioned once I finished laying out my plan. Ronan's going to come after us, after you, with everything he has left. I felt my daughter kick insistently from within my womb, as if lending her strength and conviction to my cause. With a resolute nod, I met Sienna's gaze head-on. Let him try, I said, cold determination lacing my voice. I'm done running scared. It's time for Ronan to learn what happens when you back a mother into a corner. Sienna flashed me a wolfish grin, her eyes glinting with feral approval. Well then, let's make that bastard pay. And with that, the gears of our intricately weaved con were set in motion. Ronan's downfall was now inevitable. He just didn't know it yet. With Sienna as my co-conspirator, the wheels were in motion to demolish Ronan's empire of lies and deceit. But exposing him wouldn't be a simple task. We needed to lay the groundwork meticulously, shoring up our defenses while weakening his position through strategic strikes. Over the following weeks, Sienna and I became a well-oiled machine. She provided insider intelligence on the family's illegal dealings, while I leveraged my financial evidence to start building a comprehensive case against Ronan. Money trails, damning documentation, back-channel whispers to law enforcement, everything was falling into place. I also began lining up allies in preparation for the inevitable battle to come. Some were easy to recruit, like Sienna's younger brother Caleb, who had long resented Ronan's boorish behavior. Others were more hesitant, but the weight of the evidence against my husband ultimately proved convincing. This is some heavy stuff, Lay, Jen, my best friend since childhood, muttered as she pored over the paper trail detailing Ronan's fraud. You know he's going to fight this tooth and nail, right? That's the plan, I replied grimly. He's going to realize just how big of a mistake it was underestimating what a woman's scorn can accomplish. Jen shook her head in disbelief. I knew that asshole was a piece of work, but money laundering? Illegal business dealings? Jesus. Her gaze turned serious as she looked up at me. You sure you're ready for the fallout that comes with taking him down like this? He could try to take everything. Your money, the baby. My hand instinctively went to my swollen belly as I felt my daughter shift inside me. That was the entire crux of this mission, wasn't it? To ensure she would never have to suffer the same toxic mistreatment I had endured. To build her a life free of Ronan's poisonous influence. He doesn't get to decide what's best for my child, not anymore, I said firmly. If he wants a war, he's going to get one, and I don't intend to lose. Jen studied me appraisingly for a long moment before giving a resolute nod. Then you've got my full support. Let's take that bastard down. With more allies rallying to the cause, our efforts started bearing fruit. A scathing expose in the local paper cast scrutiny on Ronan's business affairs. Anonymous tips triggered preliminary IRS and SEC investigations. I could sense the walls closing in around him, his confidence gradually fracturing. It all came to a head one evening when Ronan stormed into the house, his face contorted into a mask of frothing rage. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? He snarled, violently slamming his briefcase onto the table. You had to go and poke your nose where it didn't belong. I stared at him impassively, cradling my pregnant belly. That's rich, coming from you. I'm simply bringing your shady dealings into the light. You conniving little bitch! Ronan's sudden roar made me flinch. You think you've won? That you can take everything I've built and destroy it on a whim? He closed the distance between us, his meaty hand gripping my arm in a vice-like grip. I'll bury you before you can take one more step, do you hear me? This family, this life, it's all mine. You're nothing. His spittle flew in my face as I met his crazed stare with steely defiance. We'll see about that. With a disgusted grunt, Ronan shoved me away and stormed out, leaving me to rub the spot where his fingers had dug into my flesh. I felt my daughter kick anxiously, as if she could sense the tension and rage radiating off her father. "Don't worry, sweetie," I murmured, gently rubbing my belly to soothe her. "That's the last time he'll ever get to hurt us." The game was afoot, the battle lines clearly drawn. There would be no turning back now. Ronan's ignorant arrogance had opened the door for his downfall. Soon, very soon, everything he'd schemed and clawed for would be ashes at his feet. And from those ashes, I would rise, his conquering phoenix, mercilessly guiding the path of his self-immolation. Despite Ronan's blustering threats, Sienna and I refused to let up the pressure. With our meticulous groundwork laid over the past weeks, all we needed was the right catalyst to detonate the explosive truth and bring the full force of our retaliation crashing down. That spark arrived in the most unlikely of places, a goddamn family event, of all things. It was one of those obnoxious high society galas the Jacobs clan used for thinly veiled vanity showcasing. A garish display of old money and entitlement under the guise of charity that made my skin crawl. Ronan, desperate to maintain appearances, had all but demanded my attendance, claiming it would soften the growing PR onslaught against him. So there I was, 7.5 months pregnant, squeezed into an uncomfortably tight dress and trotted out like some grotesque show pony to help resuscitate my husband's wilting image. The hypocrisy was galling, but I played along, for now. The night itself was a sordid parade of self-congratulatory speeches and pathetic social climbing, exactly as I'd expected. I found myself growing increasingly lightheaded and nauseous, thanks to a combination of my condition and the sickeningly opulent atmosphere. "Sienna, I need some air," I muttered, struggling to conceal my discomfort. "Being around these vapid vultures is making me ill." "You just say the word and we're out of here," she replied with a reassuring squeeze of my arm. "This whole charade is utter bullshit anyway." Nodding gratefully, I excused myself from the overcrowded ballroom and made my way towards the balcony doors, each step feeling heavier than the last. I was nearly there when a grimy hand clamped around my elbow, whipping me around forcefully. "Just where do you think you're going?" Ronan sneered, his tuxedo hanging open sloppily and his breath reeking of whiskey. "Your little disappearing act is going to make us look bad." I wrenched my arm free from his grasp, defiant anger flaring. "Us? Don't flatter yourself, Ronan. You're the only one with an image to protect here, and at great cost, it seems." He threw his head back with a contemptuous bark of laughter. "Oh, spare me the self-righteous melodrama, would you? I'm doing what's necessary to maintain the family legacy." "Your legacy is mired in lies and illegal money, you degenerate." I shot back, fighting the wave of dizziness washing over me. "How many more laws do you plan to break, just to feather your filthy nest?" Ronan's face contorted in an ugly sneer. "Watch your tone when speaking to me, you ungrateful whore." The vile insult was cut off as a searing pain lanced through my abdomen, forcing me to double over with a strangled cry. Instantly, the room started spinning sickeningly as I clutched at my stomach. "Oh God, something's wrong." I whimpered through gritted teeth, panic seizing my chest. "The baby. I think she's coming." For one infinitesimal moment, Ronan's scowl slipped just enough for the briefest flicker of concern to register on his face. But it was quickly extinguished as his mask of disdain slammed back into place. "Of course you'd choose now for this pathetic drama queen act," he growled, making no move to help me. "Just another attention grab like always." I could scarcely believe his callous reaction through the haze of agony racking my body. "Ronan, please, I need help." From somewhere behind me, I heard Sienna's urgent voice calling my name as she rushed to my side. "Layla! Oh my God, what's going on?" Her eyes went wide with panic as she quickly assessed the situation. "We need to get you to a hospital now." Ronan simply stood back, arms folded across his chest, with a sneer of derision painted across his smug features. "Don't bother," he spat venomously. "She's clearly just trying to stir up another scene. Pathetic even for you, Layla." White-hot rage cut through the pain as Sienna helped me up, glaring daggers at my wretched husband. "You heard the lady. She needs medical attention, asshole!" she shouted, somehow managing to steady my trembling form. "Are you really that much of a bastard that you're going to let your own child suffer?" His only response was a disdainful curl of his lip and a dismissive wave of his hand. and in that moment, any lingering shred of affection or loyalty I might have harbored for Ronan Jacobs dissipated into the ether. Through the tumultuous storm of agony and mounting rage, one thought rang out with piercing clarity. This petty, narcissistic monster could no longer be allowed to slither through this life unchecked. Not after everything he'd done, every reprehensible betrayal and cruelty I had endured at his hands. As Sienna half-carried, half-dragged me out of that wretched gala, the air thick with horrified murmurs from onlookers, I knew with every fiber of my being that there would be no quarter given, no more playing by his rules, operating within his corrupt boundaries. From this night forward, the delicate campaign of attrition would give way to an all-out scorched earth offensive. Ronan's downfall was no longer a question of if, but when. And I would be the White Walkyrie leading the charge over the charred remains of his pathetic existence until only ash and ruin remained. After the disastrous gala where Ronan so callously disregarded my health and our unborn child's well-being, any pretense of civility between us disintegrated into acrid dust. With Sienna's help, I had been rushed to the hospital, the doctors just barely managing to halt my premature labor. But that horrific night proved to be the flashpoint, the spark that ignited the wildfire of our intricately laid revenge plot. While I recovered under Sienna's watchful care, she began systematically executing the final phases of our operation, unloading salvo after salvo of damning evidence, whistleblower accounts, and criminal documentation onto the appropriate channels. Authorities, journalists, corporate watchdogs, no stone was left unturned as she mercilessly exposed the staggering depths of Ronan's duplicity and criminality. The dominoes began falling rapidly after that, one by one, until an unstoppable chain reaction took hold. SEC investigations gave way to federal grand juries, which then triggered disastrous civil lawsuits and IRS tax fraud probes. What had once been a contained snuff operation ballooned into an all-consuming inferno that threatened to engulf Ronan's entire empire of lies. And at the center of that conflagration stood the man himself, eyes bulging with impotent rage as he watched everything he'd conned and swindled for decades up in acrimonious smoke. You meddlesome bitch, he roared, slamming his meaty fist onto the desk during one of his increasingly frequent tantrums. You've ruined everything. My life's work, our legacy. It's all ashes because of your insipid vendetta. I regarded him stoically from across the office, completely unmoved by his theatrics. You have no one to blame but yourself, Ronan. Your greed and hubris were your own undoing, not me. His beady eyes narrowed to slits as he rose from behind his desk on unsteady feet. Don't play innocent with me, Layla. I know you were behind this. All of this. He gestured wildly at the stacks of legal notices and indictments littering every surface, debris from the smoldering remains of his diseased empire. You and that venomous snake, Sienna. We simply exposed the truth you worked so hard to bury, I countered coolly. Did you really think you could run this criminal farce indefinitely without any consequences? Ronan bared his teeth in an approximation of a snarl as he closed the distance between us. Up close, I could smell the reek of cheap whiskey and nervous sweat wafting off his disheveled form, a pitiful shell of the formerly sleek, intimidating con man whose fear I had lived in for so many years. You arrogant little... His slurred insult was cut off as a tiny, mewling cry pierced the air. My newborn daughter shifting restlessly in her carrier beside me. I shot him a withering glare, squaring my shoulders protectively. That's enough out of you. Not another vulgarity in front of my child. I fixed him with an icy stare, letting the unspoken threat resonate. You've inflicted enough trauma on this family. For a long, tense moment, we simply stared each other down, the snarling, feral beast backed into an inescapable corner, and the predator calmly observing its final throes. At last, Ronan seemed to wilt beneath the weight of crushing defeat clouding his gaze. Damn you, he spat bitterly, slumping back against his desk with a dull thud. Damn you and that bastard child to hell. As if on cue, Sienna strode into the room, eyes flashing as she took in the tense scene before her. Everything okay in here? Shooting Ronan one final look of disgust, I turned to face my co-conspirator and gave a tight nod. Never better. Just tying up some loose ends with the soon-to-be former Mr. Jacobs. A wicked grin split Sienna's features as she regarded her disgraced cousin with undisguised glee. Well, don't let me interrupt the reckoning. By all means, allow me to join in verbally eviscerating the sniveling husk of this pathetic, arrogant worm. She leveled a mocking glare at Ronan. Go on, you gaping asshole. What other lies do you have left to try and peddle? Ronan simply glowered in impotent rage, clenching and unclenching his fists. The faintest mutters of denial and heated curses escaped his trembling lips, but it was obvious the fight had left him. His will, his decades-long charade of power and dominance, had finally been irrevocably shattered. Turning my back to his crumpled, mumbling form, I bent down to tenderly scoop up my slumbering infant daughter, cradling her against my chest as a fierce wave of protectiveness washed over me. She was my everything now, my sole purpose, and all that mattered in this miserable world. And in that moment, I silently swore to whatever higher power that may exist, that my precious girl would never have to endure the trauma of Ronan's toxicity or fall under the twisted clutches of his family legacy. The karma he had wrought through his lifetime of malice and depravity was his cross to bear, not hers. Come on, Sienna, let's go home. There's nothing left for us among the ashes of Ronan's ruin. I spared one last contemptuous glance over my shoulder at the wretched, sniveling husk that was once my husband. This one can stew in his self-made purgatory alone. With a curt nod, Sienna fell into step beside me as we strode from the smoldering ruins of Ronan's decrepit empire. Behind us, I could feel his seething gaze burning impotently into the back of my skull. But I didn't falter, didn't dare look back. There was nothing for me amid that scorched earth, only the bright future awaiting my daughter and I beyond the caustic smoke of karmic justice. In the aftermath of Ronan's spectacular downfall, the shockwaves rippled through every facet of our lives. The legal and financial fallout had left his family's empire in irreparable ruin. Corporate entities dissolved, assets seized, reputations permanently disgraced. And at the eye of this hurricane of destruction stood Ronan himself, a bitter, sneering shell temporarily insulated by the last vestiges of his ill-gotten wealth as he licked his wounds. But even that protection was a rapidly dwindling facade. The incoming crush of criminal charges and civil litigation saw to that. I lost count of the visits from court officers, federal agents, and process servers darkening my doorstep, each one armed with another ream of subpoenas and legal filings squarely aimed at dismantling what little remained of Ronan's crumbling facade. His standard modus operandi of dismissive sneers and hollow legal threats gave way to panicked outbursts, increasingly erratic behavior, and even interventions from law enforcement when his rage spiraled out of control. "This isn't over, Layla," he roared at me through a haze of spittle during one such unhinged meltdown, eyes wild like a cornered animal. "I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your miserable life. You'll never be free of me." Staring impassively back at him through the doorway, I didn't so much as flinch as I cradled our infant daughter protectively against my chest. "Is that so? Because from where I'm standing, it seems your options for retaliation are rapidly evaporating." "Don't get smug with me, you disloyal little cunt." Ronan's voice cracked with raw fury. "Everything I had, everything I built, it's all in ruins now, because of you. But I'll make sure you suffer just as badly before this is through. Mark my words." "Tell me, Ronan, do you honestly think threatening me is going to restore your dignity at this point?" I arched a challenging brow. "I've thoroughly dismantled any illusion of you being an intimidating presence. You're already living your worst nightmare, destitute and alone, unmourned and reviled for your reprehensible actions." He opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off with an imperious sweep of my free hand. "Enough with the hollow bravado. We both know that deep down, you're nothing more than a coward and a charlatan whose house of cards has finally collapsed under its own weight." Pausing, I allowed the weight of my next words to resonate. "I'd tell you to give my regards to your cellmates, but something tells me they'll be able to smell the stench of your vileness a mile away." For a fleeting instant, something akin to naked fear flickered behind Ronan's eyes. But the split-second glimpse into what fragile sliver of humanity he had left was quickly snuffed out, his ferocious mask of feral defiance slamming back into place. "You'll get yours, Layla. One way or another, I'll make sure of that. he snarled. No bitch takes everything from Ronan Jacobs and gets away with it unscathed. Is that so? A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. We'll see about that. With one last contemptuous glare, Ronan whirled on his heel and stormed off, the once imposing figure cutting an increasingly diminutive presence with each passing day. I watched him leave unflinchingly, the weight of victory granting me a tranquil resolve I had once struggled to find amid his toxic shadow. As the fury of his exit faded into stony silence, my daughter began fussing softly against my chest. Gently shushing her, I nuzzled her downy head and hummed a tender tune until her squirms subsided into peaceful slumber once more. In that simple, serene moment, my purpose and drive crystallized into an inviolable truth. Everything I had endured, every wound and sacrifice along this tumultuous path, had all been for her. To build a world where she would never know the corrosive touch of Ronan's cruelty or malignance. A world where her limitless potential and soaring spirit would be nurtured, not bound in chains. It was then that I made an irrevocable vow, one that would guide the next phase of mine and my daughter's shared journey towards healing and vindication. I'm going to make sure that he spends the rest of his empty days withering behind bars where he belongs, I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to my little girl's head. And in doing so, I'll cleanse every last vestige of his poison from our lives. You'll never have to know the person I was before you came along, sweetie. For far too long, the scales had been tipped decisively in Ronan's favor, my light perpetually eclipsed by the suffocating gravity of his toxicity. But in dismantling his vile empire through ruthless, strategic strikes, the karmic rebalancing had begun. Now it was time to reject his cancerous influence entirely and reclaim my destiny as the self-actualized woman and mother I was always meant to become. No more entertaining his hollow legal threats or humoring his pathetic machinations from the sidelines. No more relics from the life he had claimed for me through subjugation and fear. It was time for Ronan Jacobs to at long last reap the full consequences of his cruelty and deception, without mercy or compromise. Only then could my new chapter truly begin, a tale authored by my own steadfast convictions, free from the shackles of his arrogance and malice. As the first rays of dawn crested over the horizon, my path forward was bathed in brilliant clarity. There would be no steering from this inexorable road, no wavering amid the scattered ashes of Ronan's shattered reality. The metamorphosis was complete. Like a phoenix born anew from the purifying annihilation of his transgressions, my wings were finally unfurled and poised to carry us both into a future of boundless possibility. And this time there was no force in existence that could extinguish the radiant flame of justice and redemption blazing before us. The days and weeks following Ronan's disgrace blurred together in a whirlwind of activity as I systematically extricated every remaining tentacle of his poisonous presence from our lives. The divorce proceedings were inevitably messy and drawn out, colored by one bad faith legal maneuver after another, as my now thoroughly disgraced ex-husband grasped at any remaining shred of leverage. But flanked by an impeccably prepared legal team and emboldened by Sienna's stalwart support, his pathetic delaying tactics proved futile. In the end, the courts had little sympathy to spare for a man whose reprehensible actions had been laid bare so publicly. Within 6 months, the divorce decree was ironclad. Full custody of our daughter, a sizable monetary settlement from what meager funds remained attachable after all the asset seizures, and every last thread connecting me to that rotting family legacy unceremoniously severed. I was finally free from the insidious manipulation, the demeaning insults and abuse, the generational cycle of toxicity Ronan had tried so desperately to entrench us both in. As the last mote of legal dust scattered, I felt an unbearable weight dissipate, replaced by an electrifying surge of possibility and newfound liberty. This life, this miraculous second chance, was ours and ours alone to author. No longer would I allow Ronan's cancerous presence to dictate the boundaries of our realm. With my meager savings and the settlement funds, I wasted no time leaving that wretched city in the rear view, desperate to put as many miles between us and those harrowing memories as possible. A quaint but comfortable home in the mountains was my chosen fresh start, a place to breathe and find tranquility among the hushed pines and crisp alpine air. Sienna came with me on that maiden voyage to my new sanctuary, helping me settle in and bearing witness to the dawning of this new reality we had fought so tenaciously to manifest. "Not bad for your stakes of the winnings, all things considered," she remarked with a roguish grin as we lounged on the cabin's spacious back patio, our contented niece gurgling happily in her arms. "Just a consolation prize, really," I replied with a dismissive wave of my hand, lazily sipping a glass of crisp white wine as I surveyed the breathtaking vista of evergreen trees rolling off into the distance. The true bounty is the regained peace of mind, something money alone could never buy. Sienna shot me an appraising look, nodding slowly. "You've come a long way from that demure, broken-winged sparrow Ronan tried so hard to keep clipped all those years. Not sure I've ever seen a phoenix's ascension up close like this before." "Just be glad you were on my side of the bonfire when this whole warpath started," I chuckled ruefully, twisting in my seat to meet her gaze. "I shudder to think how ruthless the retribution would have been if you'd been added to the list of co-conspirators." We shared a loaded look, one that spoke volumes to the depths of conviction and camaraderie that had driven our crusade of righteous vengeance over these past months. My unlikely ally had become an indispensable confidant and comrade-in-arms through the harshest throes of Ronan's sinister downfall. A true sister in every sense of the word. But enough about that narcissistic shit stain. I'm over the moon just to be putting that whole cancerous saga behind me, Sienna declared with an emphatic clink of her glass against mine. "Here's to breathing that crisp, rejuvenating mountain air and never having to look over our shoulders again." "I'll drink to that," I said with a contented sigh, leaning back to bask in the warmth of the mid-afternoon sun filtering through the trees. For the first time in a long, long while, I truly felt at peace. Over the ensuing months, I steadily regained my footing and settled into my new normal of single motherhood, with Sienna's unflagging moral and logistical support by my side every step of the way. There were still days where I would be struck by sudden pangs of loathing or repressed trauma over all Ronan had put me through, phantom echoes of his scathing taunts and demeaning insults rattling like pinballs through my psyche. Yet with every passing week, those haunting whispers grew more faint, more powerless against the brilliant blaze of self-actualization and fulfillment illuminating my path forward. Gradually, steadily, I rediscovered the pieces of the woman I had once been, before Ronan's poisonous influence had so thoroughly leached her ambitions and self-worth down to empty husks. With my daughter as my unbridled source of inspiration and Sienna's sage guidance, the core pillars of my identity were steadily being rebuilt from the ground up. I dove headfirst into pursuing the high-stakes financial career I had abandoned when the Jacobs clan asserted their odious sway over my life's trajectory. The fire to establish myself as a singularly brilliant market analyst and consultant raged hotter than ever before. Within 2 years, I had clawed my way back into the cutthroat arena of high finance, rapidly establishing a hard-won reputation as a fierce, savvy negotiator with an incisive and unflinching market instinct. Seemingly overnight, my fledgling boutique consultancy went from a homespun side hustle to a force to be reckoned with on the national stage. "You've got a preternatural gift for this stuff, you know?" Sienna remarked in an odd tone one evening as I exited yet another lucrative teleconference, 6 figures richer for an hour's worth of counsel. "The sheer brass one's on you to step back into this shark's den after everything you went through." I simply shrugged, my gaze drifting over to where my 5-year-old daughter lay curled up in contented slumber on the couch, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. They tried to break me, and nearly succeeded, mostly because I allowed them to. I'll be damned if I squander this second lease on life by needlessly limiting myself again. The raw truth of those words hung in the air for a heavy pause as we both watched my little girl's peaceful rising and falling beneath her tattered blanket. Besides, I've got to set the bar high so this little munchkin knows just how brilliant and tenacious she can grow up to be, I continued wistfully. Her future is the only inheritance that matters to me now. The rest is just excess noise. Meeting Sienna's proud gaze with a resolute nod of affirmation, I felt the last vestiges of doubt and fear permanently slough off, like the molted skin of a transcendent serpent. What had once been shameful shackles had been meticulously reworked into brilliant new armor, steeled against the harsh realities that still lurked beyond this sanctum. Because out there in that tumultuous world, the specter of Ronan Jacobs and his ilk still festered. Venal, vicious aberrations perpetually locked in conflict with the strength and integrity I now embodied. And while his individual chapter had been scribed into ignominious history, that eternal crusade waged on in others. But I was more than ready to face those battles anew with a cleansed spirit and crystalline clarity of purpose, to uplift and cultivate that divine spark of potential until it erupted into an all-consuming wildfire, burning away every last mote of indignity and fear. No more poisoned births or anguished gasps for air amid that choking miasma of societal toxicity. Only the radiant promise of new dawns, to be ushered in by champions of change and retribution, unshackled from the anchors of oppression. Because on that day, standing at the precipice of our boldly reclaimed destiny, I was no longer prey, just the merciless apex predator, continually reborn in a blaze of glory.